When Chantel Everett first met Pedro Jimeno, it seemed like the kind of love story people dream about. Two people from completely different worlds, united by passion, mystery, and an undeniable spark. Chantel, the outspoken, confident woman from Atlanta, and Pedro, the charming, ambitious man from the Dominican Republic, had the chemistry that reality television feeds on. Their story began in the early days of 90 Day Fiancé, and fans were instantly hooked. What started as a romantic adventure soon became a roller coaster of emotions, misunderstandings, and explosive family confrontations that would later define one of the most talked about relationships in the franchise's history. In the beginning, everything felt electric. Chantel and Pedro met through mutual friends online, and what started as simple conversations quickly turned into a whirlwind romance. They spent hours talking, laughing, and dreaming of a future together. Pedro's warmth and charm drew Chantel in, and before long, she was planning a trip to meet him in person. When they finally met in the Dominican Republic, it was like a movie moment. Two people standing on a crowded street, nervous but smiling, realizing that their connection was real. For Chantel, this wasn't just an adventure. She truly believed she had found the man who understood her heart. And for Pedro, it was a chance to build something new. A better life perhaps, but also a genuine bond with someone who made him feel seen. Their early moments were filled with laughter, with dreams of marriage, travel, and family. It was the kind of love story that fans of 90 Day Fiancé couldn't resist watching unfold. But beneath the smiles and the sweet words, there were differences neither of them could ignore. The challenges began as soon as Chantel brought Pedro to the United States. Culture clashes, language barriers, and family skepticism cast long shadows over their happiness. Chantel's family, especially her parents, Karen and Thomas, were suspicious from the start. They questioned Pedro's intentions, wondering if he truly loved their daughter, or if he was using the marriage as a way to gain U.S. residency. Chantel defended him fiercely, often standing alone against her family's doubts. She believed love could overcome anything. But the pressure was already building. Pedro's family had their own opinions too. His mother, Lydia, and sister, Nicole, believed he deserved to focus on his own future, not just Chantel's happiness. They saw Chantel's family as overbearing and disrespectful. What was meant to be a union of two people turned into a battle of two families, each defending their pride, each convinced that the other side was the problem. It wasn't long before this conflict spilled into every corner of their relationship. When Chantel and Pedro appeared on the Family Chantel, their story became bigger than themselves. The cameras captured everything, every argument, every accusation, every tear. Fans watched as love turned into resentment, and the couple who once seemed inseparable began to drift apart. Pedro grew distant, often retreating into silence when Chantel wanted answers. He began spending more time at work and less time at home. Chantel felt abandoned, unloved, and confused. What had happened to the man who once promised her forever? The signs were there, long before the words were spoken. Pedro's laughter no longer reached his eyes. His tone grew cold. His affection faded into habit. And yet, Chantel kept fighting, believing she could fix it. That if she just tried harder, loved deeper, and held on longer, things could go back to how they were. But something inside Pedro had already changed. Behind closed doors, their conversations grew sharp and defensive. Every discussion about family or money turned into a battlefield. Pedro accused Chantel of being controlling, of not supporting his goals. Chantel accused him of lying, of growing closer to his co-workers than to his wife. There were whispers about Pedro spending time with a female colleague, about late nights, about emotional distance that no apology could repair. The tension was suffocating, and still they kept going, bound by history, by pride, by the fear of admitting the truth. By the time the cameras returned for another season, their marriage was no longer built on love. It was built on resentment. The world watched as Chantel cried on screen, begging for honesty, while Pedro's face hardened into indifference. It was a painful contrast. The woman who had given everything, and the man who seemed already gone. Fans debated endlessly online. Was Pedro unfaithful? Was Chantel too dramatic? Was it ever real love to begin with? Then came the moment that would change everything. During one of their final confrontations, Pedro looked at her, the woman who had stood by him through every accusation, every family fight, every humiliation, and said the words that shattered it all. "I never loved you." The silence that followed was louder than any argument they'd ever had. Chantel's expression froze, her eyes wide in disbelief. For years she had defended him, loved him, sacrificed for him, and now, in one sentence, he erased it all. That sentence didn't just end a marriage. It ended years of illusion, hope, and denial. The audience felt the blow. It wasn't just a breakup. It was betrayal turned into words. "I never loved you." 4 words that burned through every promise, every memory, every tear. For Chantel, it was like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Everything she had built her life around was suddenly gone. The man she thought was her soulmate had just confessed that it was never love at all. She sat there, speechless, her mind replaying every moment. The wedding, the vows, the dreams they once shared, wondering how much of it had been real. The truth was cruel, but it was final. The news spread fast. Fans reacted with outrage, disbelief, and heartbreak. Social media erupted with clips of the confrontation, flooded with comments defending Chantel and condemning Pedro. How could he say that? She didn't deserve this. This is heartbreaking. It became more than just a reality TV storyline. It became a cultural moment, a modern tragedy playing out in real time. Pedro's supporters argued he was just being honest. They said he'd been unhappy for years, that maybe his words were cruel, but truthful. But the timing, the tone, the coldness, it was too much for many to bear. Chantel had become a symbol of emotional endurance, the woman who stayed loyal until loyalty broke her. And Pedro, in that instant, became the villain of his own story. Yet, as shocking as those words were, they didn't come out of nowhere. Behind the scenes, sources close to the couple revealed that the marriage had been dying for months, perhaps even years. Pedro's new job had become his escape, while Chantel's growing suspicions pushed him further away. They were living in the same house, but in 2 separate worlds. What had once been love was now only coexistence. Chantel's family, long skeptical of Pedro's intentions, saw this as proof of what they'd warned her about. Her mother, Karen, had famously said, "I always knew he wasn't in it for love." And now, in the most public way possible, those words seemed vindicated. But for Chantel, there was no victory, only pain. The aftermath was devastating. Chantel withdrew from the spotlight for a while, trying to heal. Friends described her as heartbroken, but determined. She wasn't just mourning a marriage. She was mourning the years she'd lost believing in it. Meanwhile, Pedro seemed to move on quickly. He focused on work, posted new photos, and appeared distant from the chaos that followed him online. The contrast was striking. One grieving, one rebuilding, one broken, one free. As the dust settled, fans began asking deeper questions. Had Pedro ever truly loved her? Or had the entire relationship been a means to an end? A way to build a new life, a career, a platform. The more people looked back, the more cracks they saw in the foundation of their story. The small lies, the hidden resentment, the moments that once seemed trivial, now carried heavier meaning. What once looked like passion, now looked like control. What once felt like love, now looked like survival. But Chantel didn't disappear. Slowly, she began to reclaim her narrative. Interviews, social media posts, public appearances, each one stronger than the last. She refused to be defined by his rejection. She started speaking about self-worth, healing, and moving forward. Her fans rallied behind her, turning her pain into empowerment. The heartbreak that once made headlines became a lesson for millions watching. That love built on imbalance will always collapse. Pedro, on the other hand, faced a very different public reaction. Once admired for his charm, he became the subject of criticism and skepticism. Every move he made was scrutinized. Every new post was analyzed. People wanted to know, did he regret it? Did he mean it when he said, "I never loved you"? To this day, that question lingers. For now, what remains is the legacy of their story. A reminder that behind every glamorous TV romance lies a truth far more complicated. Chantel and Pedro began as a love story, but they ended as a cautionary tale. And those 4 words, cold, final, unforgettable, became the headline that changed everything. The moment Pedro's words hit the air, the reaction was instant. Viewers froze, then rewound the clip again and again. Within hours, that single scene had exploded across the internet. News outlets ran with the quote, "I never loved you. Pedro Jimeno breaks silence in final episode." Hashtags like Nauseous Team Chantel and Cajun Pedro said, what started trending before dawn. People weren't just talking about a breakup. They were dissecting a cultural moment, proof that even the most polished reality couples could implode under pressure. For fans of the family Chantel, it felt personal. They had watched this couple grow from nervous newlyweds to public figures. Now they were witnessing the collapse in real time. Every network wanted a piece of the story. TMZ ran exclusive interviews with anonymous insiders. Entertainment Tonight released a panel discussion titled Love or Lies, The Chantel-Pedro Split. Bloggers analyzed body language, lip-read micro-expressions, and even slowed the footage to catch the instant Chantel's eyes filled with tears. Chantel went silent at first. Her social media pages went dark. No stories, no posts, nothing but a single quote pinned to her profile. Silence is also an answer. That single sentence said more than any statement could. It showed dignity. It showed control. But it also showed hurt. Pedro, on the other hand, didn't hide. Within a week, he appeared on an Instagram Live with friends, laughing, playing music, and avoiding every question about Chantel. When a follower typed, "Do you regret it?" he smirked and replied, "Sometimes truth hurts, but truth is freedom." That clip spread like wildfire. Comment sections turned into battlefields. Half defended his right to be honest. The other half accused him of cruelty. The narrative had officially split into two camps. Behind the scenes, production crews scrambled to manage the backlash. TLC executives debated whether to release unseen footage or to protect both sides from further damage. Contracts were still active, and both Chantel and Pedro were obligated to fulfill post-show interviews. It became a balancing act between drama and decency. How far could they go without breaking either reputation completely? Meanwhile, Chantel's family was fuming. Karen Everett, never one to stay quiet, took to Instagram Live and spoke with the calm fire that made her famous. "A real man doesn't build a life on a lie," she said. "My daughter gave her heart. He gave excuses." Thousands watched, commenting hearts and prayer emojis. The Everett family had warned Chantel for years, and now they were proven right. But victory felt hollow. No mother celebrates being right when her daughter's heart is broken on national television. Thomas Everett, Chantel's father, stayed quieter but firm. In one rare interview, he simply said, "We always hoped he loved her. We were wrong." Those words, spoken softly, carried more weight than a scream. Even Chantel's siblings, River and Winter, joined the conversation. River posted a story with the caption, "If you break one of us, you face all of us." The Everett family unity became a story of its own. Viewers admired how they rallied behind Chantel, while still urging her not to lose herself in bitterness. In contrast, Pedro's family, his mother Lydia and sister Nicole, appeared on Dominican talk shows defending him. Lydia insisted that Chantel had disrespected their culture, that her family never accepted Pedro as an equal. "He suffered in silence," she said. "He tried to love her, but love cannot survive disrespect." That statement reignited the cultural debate that had followed them since season 1. The clash between two families, two worlds, two definitions of loyalty. As headlines multiplied, Chantel quietly sought therapy. Friends close to her later revealed she was devastated but determined. She began journaling, spending time with her siblings, and avoiding public spaces. But even as she tried to heal, cameras and fans followed. Every grocery store sighting, every night out with friends, became Chantel spotted post-split. Reporters camped outside her Atlanta neighborhood, desperate for a reaction. Then one afternoon, she finally spoke. A short interview with People magazine, calm but heartbreaking. "I didn't expect forever to end with those words. I thought love meant working through the hard parts. Maybe I was wrong." Her honesty disarmed everyone. She didn't attack Pedro. She didn't make excuses. She simply acknowledged the pain, and that humility made the world love her more. The interview went viral within minutes. The comment section flooded with support. Messages from women who had survived betrayal, from men who regretted their own cold words, from fans thanking her for showing grace when anger would have been easier. Pedro's camp stayed mostly silent afterward. He declined major interviews, insisting he wanted privacy, though his social media activity told a different story. Pictures from outings, smiling with colleagues, captioned with phrases like, "New beginnings." Each post triggered new speculation. Was he already seeing someone else? Was this the reason behind the breakup? Screenshots of him with a female coworker surfaced online, intensifying the narrative that the marriage had ended long before his confession. Entertainment journalists pieced together timelines, comparing filming dates to social media activity. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Pedro's emotional distance had started long before the cameras caught up. For Chantel's supporters, that confirmed everything. For Pedro's defenders, it proved nothing more than two people growing apart. Either way, the discussion refused to die. In Atlanta, Chantel slowly started returning to public life. She was spotted attending charity events, smiling politely, but visibly thinner, quieter. Yet there was strength in her posture, the quiet resolve of someone rebuilding herself from the inside out. Her friends described her as heartbroken but healing. She began studying for additional nursing certifications, a subtle message that she was moving forward with or without love. As the months passed, the family Chantel aired its reunion episode. It was the most anticipated broadcast in franchise history. Fans tuned in from across the globe, hoping to see a confrontation, a closure, maybe even reconciliation. What they got was a masterclass in composure. Chantel arrived poised, wearing white, symbolic, serene. Pedro arrived late, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. When the host asked Chantel how she felt, hearing those words replayed again and again, she took a breath and said, "It hurt then, and it hurts now. But pain also shows you who you are." "I know who I am." The studio fell silent. Even Pedro couldn't meet her eyes. When it was his turn, he tried to explain. "I was angry," he said. "I felt trapped. Maybe I did love her once, but not the way she needed." The statement was clumsy, half apology, half deflection. The host pressed, "So when you said I never loved you, did you mean it?" Pedro hesitated. Too long. Finally he said, "In that moment, yes." That pause said everything. Chantel blinked but didn't cry. She simply nodded and whispered, "Thank you for proving my point." Viewers described the moment as chilling. The clip became one of the most watched in TLC history. After the reunion, media outlets declared Chantel the Queen of Poise. Opinion columns praised her restraint and emotional intelligence. Magazines published features titled, "How Chantel Everett Turned Heartbreak into Empowerment." Interviews shifted from gossip to admiration. She became a spokesperson for self-respect. After betrayal, Pedro, meanwhile, faced mounting scrutiny. His real estate career in Atlanta suffered at first as clients associated his name with controversy. Rumors swirled about disciplinary issues and unprofessional conduct, though nothing was ever confirmed. Over time, he tried to rebuild, focusing on work and avoiding television. Yet the internet never forgot. Every new appearance brought fresh comments. "Is this the man who said, 'I never loved you'?" His identity became inseparable from that moment. By the 1-year anniversary of the breakup, Chantel was thriving. She had launched a lifestyle page, sharing fitness tips and reflections on self-worth. Each post carried subtle messages about resilience, not bitterness. She rarely mentioned Pedro by name. Instead, she wrote lines like, "Peace is the best revenge," or "Healing is louder than hate." Fans applauded her evolution. She had gone from reality TV heartbreak to role model. In contrast, Pedro's social media presence dwindled. Occasional photos of his car, his dog, a beach trip, but the energy was gone. Followers noticed the shift. "He looks lost," one commenter wrote. Another said, "Maybe he finally realized what he threw away." Whether true or not, public opinion had turned. Still, some defended him. They argued that everyone has the right to end an unhappy marriage, even harshly. They said Chantel's family had suffocated the relationship, that Pedro was only reacting to years of tension. It was a reminder that in the court of public opinion, truth is rarely absolute. Every story has two sides. And somewhere between love and resentment lies the space where understanding dies. As months turned into seasons, both moved on, but the internet didn't. Compilation videos of their happiest moments, followed by that devastating confession, racked up millions of views. Reaction channels analyzed every expression. Relationship coaches used them as case studies for emotional detachment and narcissistic breakups. It became larger than entertainment. It became education. Chantel used that wave to redefine her brand. She collaborated with mental health advocates, speaking about boundaries, trust, and healing. Her calm, thoughtful tone made her a natural fit for daytime interviews. "I don't regret loving him," she said in one segment, "because love taught me who I don't want to be anymore." That line became a quote poster, shared everywhere. Pedro kept silent. No denials, no apologies, just silence. And in that silence, the world wrote its own story for him. Some said he was ashamed. Others said he was relieved. But one fact was clear. The words he spoke had defined both their lives. By year 2, Chantel had stepped fully into her new identity. She purchased her own home, traveled with friends, and radiated independence. In one vlog, she said, "Sometimes losing someone is the beginning of finding yourself." Her audience flooded the comments with love. They weren't watching a victim anymore. They were watching a survivor. Pedro's path remained uncertain. He continued to work quietly, avoiding interviews. A few fans who met him in public described him as polite but distant, like someone living with a ghost. Maybe that ghost was the memory of what he'd said, or the realization that honesty delivered without compassion can destroy more than it frees. By now, the family Chantel had shifted focus entirely to Chantel's new chapter. Episodes featured her rebuilding relationships, redefining purpose, rediscovering peace. Ratings soared. Viewers found comfort in her growth, proof that heartbreak could lead to rebirth. Media analysts called it the redemption arc. TLC executives called it record-breaking. But for Chantel, it was simply life. Pain, then clarity. And still, in the quiet corners of the internet, the debate continued. Did Pedro ever love her? Or, was "I never loved you" the truest thing he ever said? No one can answer that except the two who lived it. What remains undeniable is the impact. That one sentence reshaped how fans view love, trust, and public vulnerability. It showed that even under bright studio lights, truth can still wound. Chantel learned to turn that wound into wisdom. Pedro learned that freedom without empathy is hollow. And the world learned that sometimes the loudest breakups leave behind the quietest lessons. After the reunion dust settled, the noise didn't stop. It only changed pitch. For the first time in years, Chantel was no longer reacting to a crisis. She was directing her own story. Her heartbreak had made her famous, but she refused to let it define her. With every new post, she rewrote the narrative from tragedy to evolution. Her followers noticed the shift immediately. The woman who once looked exhausted and defensive on camera now looked radiant and calm. Her captions carried quiet confidence. Healing isn't linear, but it's worth it. Thank God for endings that push us toward better beginnings. Those words resonated. Brands began reaching out. Wellness companies, lifestyle podcasts, motivational platforms, all wanting her to share her story. Chantel had become more than a reality star. She had become a symbol of resilience, At first, she hesitated to accept offers. Fame had cost her so much already, but therapy had taught her that telling the truth can also heal. So she started small, a guest appearance on a podcast called Unfiltered Hearts. The host asked what love meant to her now. Chantel paused, smiled and said, "It means freedom, not the kind that leaves you, but the kind that lets you breathe." That one line went viral again. Within days, millions had watched the clip. Comments poured in. "This woman is glowing." She turned pain into peace. While Chantel was blooming, Pedro was drifting. His business, once full of promise, began losing clients quietly. Some appointments cancelled without reason. Others never returned calls. It wasn't sabotage. It was reputation fatigue. When your name becomes a headline for heartbreak, people start to hesitate. The same charisma that once drew people in now reminded them of betrayal. Pedro's closest circle noticed the difference too. Friends said he smiled less, partied less, spoke less. One of his co-workers later admitted anonymously, "He wasn't the same. It's like the spotlight burned him out." He avoided public events, and when he did appear, he looked distracted, polite but distant. For months he maintained silence, but silence doesn't erase memory. Fans continued to tag him in clips of the breakup. Some messages were cruel, others were oddly sympathetic. "You made a mistake. Own it. You'll regret those words forever." One post showed a side-by-side photo of Chantel's glow-up next to Pedro's tired expression. The caption read, "The one who heals always wins." It gathered hundreds of thousands of likes. Meanwhile, Chantel's social life slowly expanded. She began traveling again. First short trips with friends, then longer journeys abroad. Pictures of beaches, quiet dinners, and laughter replaced the tear-streaked images fans remembered. Every photo carried an undertone of renewal. She wasn't flaunting revenge. She was showing survival. Her audience had matured with her. Many who once watched the family Chantel for drama now followed for inspiration. They found pieces of their own breakups in her story. Her page became a soft space, a digital community for anyone recovering from emotional damage. She posted about boundaries, emotional literacy, and the courage to walk away. It wasn't scripted television anymore. It was real growth happening in public. Then came the documentary proposal. A streaming platform approached Chantel with an idea. A limited series, not about the breakup, but about rebuilding life after it. She hesitated, afraid of reopening wounds, but ultimately agreed. On her terms. No staged confrontations, no revenge narrative, just truth. The result was Chantel, unbroken. When the first trailer dropped, the response was overwhelming. The footage showed her journaling, visiting her childhood home, meeting fans who shared similar experiences. It wasn't glamorous. It was raw, honest, and human. Reviewers called it quietly powerful. Overnight, Chantel transformed from a reality TV personality into a respected public figure. Pedro watched from the sidelines. He didn't comment publicly, but those close to him said he did watch the series, alone. Friends claimed he admitted that parts of it hit hard. The episode where Chantel talked about forgiveness seemed to bother him most. She said, "Forgiveness isn't saying they were right. It's saying I won't let their wrongs own me." That quote was printed on t-shirts, memes, and posters. It was impossible for him to avoid. His attempts to rebuild his own image were less successful. A YouTube channel invited him for an interview titled Life After Reality TV. He accepted. maybe hoping to show a humbler side. But when the host asked about the "I never loved you" moment, he deflected again. It was heat of the moment. Viewers weren't convinced. The comments were merciless. Still, no accountability. You had years to explain, and that's all. The video's dislike ratio soared. He deleted the clip within a week. For Chantel, that period marked complete emotional closure. She stopped talking about the marriage entirely. Her interviews turned to topics like financial independence, women's health, and education. She used her platform to sponsor nursing scholarships and support domestic abuse awareness campaigns. Each step distanced her further from the chaos that once defined her. Still, fans wouldn't let the story die. On Reddit, Facebook, and TikTok, thousands of discussions continued dissecting every phase of their relationship. Some users treated it like folklore, a digital morality tale about love, ambition, and communication breakdowns. Others argued over who was to blame. In those debates, Chantel had become almost mythic, the woman who survived humiliation and came out shining. Pedro, meanwhile, represented a warning, not just about dishonesty, but about pride. Relationship coaches referenced him when discussing emotional immaturity. Articles analyzed how avoidance and resentment can turn affection into apathy. His name had become shorthand for the person who let a good one go. Privately, he seemed to realize it. A friend later shared that he admitted missing her sometimes. "Not the fights," he said, "just her energy, the way she believed in me." But regret rarely arrives in time to change the ending. By then, Chantel was far beyond reach. In the third year after the breakup, their lives had completely diverged. Chantel had purchased a home, started a wellness podcast, and written a short ebook called Learning to Stand Still. It wasn't a memoir, more like letters to herself, reflections on love and self-respect. The book sold modestly but touched deeply. Reviewers described it as gentle wisdom from someone who's lived the storm. Pedro, conversely, downsized. He moved to a quieter apartment, close to his mother, and focused on small real estate projects. He wasn't struggling financially, but the energy that once drove him seemed to fade. He stayed off television completely. His Instagram feed turned minimalist. Sunsets, gym photos, motivational quotes with no captions. It felt like he was trying to erase the noise by retreating into simplicity. Then, unexpectedly, a photo surfaced. Pedro at a local community event, shaking hands with a charity director. The picture looked normal, even wholesome, but the internet wasn't ready to forgive. Comments reignited. People reposted the old clips again, reminding everyone of his past. It was proof that the internet never really forgets. It archives our worst moments indefinitely. Chantel, aware of the renewed chatter, refused to engage. When asked during a live stream if she ever thought about Pedro, she smiled and said, "I wish him peace. That's all." It was short, final, and graceful. The closing sentence of a long chapter. Her fans, however, carried her story forward. They called it the glow-up era. Memes compared her calm confidence to her earlier turmoil. Self-help channels quoted her lines. Even mainstream media took note. In an interview with Good Morning America, she summarized everything with one sentence. "Sometimes you have to lose what you wanted to find what you needed." That quote sealed her transformation narrative. By the fourth year, Chantel's world had expanded far beyond reality television. She partnered with foundations focused on emotional health, appeared on university panels about women in media, and began quietly mentoring younger influencers about handling fame responsibly. Each appearance reinforced how far she'd come. Pedro's world had shrunk to near anonymity. Partly by choice, partly by fatigue, he rarely granted interviews, preferring solitude over scrutiny. But occasionally, he would be spotted leaving a cafe, head down, headphones in, avoiding cameras. There was no arrogance left, only quiet endurance. Some say he regretted the words. Others believe he still stood by them. No one truly knows. What's certain is that the 4 words, "I never loved you," became a sentence that haunted him more than anyone else. In contrast, Chantel turned that sentence into fuel. It taught her boundaries, purpose, and faith in herself. She no longer sought closure from others. She found it within. The irony wasn't lost on fans. The man who claimed freedom ended up trapped by memory, while the woman he dismissed walked free. By the time Chantel, Unbroken was renewed for a second season, focusing on her work with young women, the audience no longer saw her as a character in a breakup story. She had become a guide. Her calm voice and measured words carried authority earned through pain. She wasn't preaching revenge. She was preaching recovery. Critics praised her transformation as one of the rare reality TV evolutions that felt authentic. She didn't chase fame. One review said, "She outgrew it." Her journey reminded viewers that public heartbreak can either destroy or refine you. The choice is yours. Pedro's silence eventually became his only language. Some fans interpreted it as dignity, others as avoidance. Either way, it closed the circle. 2 people who once shouted across screens now spoke only through absence. And yet, there's something poetic about how the story resolved. Love had brought them recognition, but honesty, even brutal honesty, had shaped their destinies. For Chantel, it became rebirth. For Pedro, a lifelong mirror. In the end, their paths told the same lesson from opposite sides. Love is not proven by words. It's proven by presence. When presence disappears, so does love. Chantel's story is now studied in media classes as a case of image reinvention. Pedro's remains a reminder that one moment of cruelty can echo forever in the digital age. Together, they changed how audiences view reality. They showed that behind edited scenes are real hearts, real lessons, and consequences that outlast fame. Years later, when asked in a quiet interview whether she still believed in love, Chantel answered without hesitation, "Absolutely, but next time, it won't need cameras to be real." That sentence closed the loop. Not with bitterness, but with grace, because even in a world addicted to drama, healing will always be the real headline. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, the silence felt strange. For nearly a decade, Chantel Everett and Pedro Jimeno had lived under constant public scrutiny. Their relationship had been dissected by millions, replayed in reaction clips, and turned into lessons on love, loyalty, and pride. But once the season ended, the noise slowly faded. What remained were 2 people trying to rebuild ordinary lives after extraordinary exposure. Chantel's post-show phase began with structure. She returned full-time to her nursing career, this time in a supervisory role at a private clinic in Atlanta. Colleagues describe her as disciplined, polite, and focused. She arrives early, keeps her head down, and avoids gossip about her past. Her patients rarely recognize her at first. Only when they catch the surname do they realize they're speaking to one of television's most discussed figures. By then, her professionalism usually overshadows any curiosity. She's earned respect for what she does, not who she once was on screen. Outside work, Chantel uses her platform more strategically. She collaborates with non-profit groups focused on women's education and financial literacy. One of her recurring messages is simple. Independence isn't the opposite of love. It's what keeps love honest. The statement captures her new philosophy. Shaped by experience rather than resentment, she speaks occasionally at community colleges, discussing emotional intelligence and the pressures of performing one's personal life for entertainment. Each time she appears, students note her calm authority. The once defensive reality star now carries the quiet confidence of someone who has processed everything and moved on. Pedro's life followed a different route. After his reputation suffered online, he scaled back his public presence and concentrated on real estate work. Over time, he rebuilt a modest but steady career. Former clients who had distanced themselves slowly returned once the media glare faded. Industry colleagues say he has become more reserved, polite but guarded, unwilling to discuss anything beyond business. For Pedro, rebuilding wasn't about fame anymore. It was about stability. The same ambition that once pushed him into television now fuels a quieter pursuit of normalcy. The two no longer communicate, and sources close to both confirm that there's been no contact for several years. Legal matters surrounding property and finances concluded without dispute, signaling that both wanted closure rather than continued confrontation. Neither side has pursued another televised project involving the other. The networks moved on, the ratings spike subsided, and what once dominated headlines now exists mostly in reruns and archives. Yet the story didn't disappear. Media scholars began analyzing the family Chantel in journalism and communications courses, citing it as a case study in parasocial engagement, the phenomenon where viewers form deep emotional attachments to reality TV participants. Researchers noted how the audience's empathy shifted over time, reflecting broader conversations about gender roles, immigrant identity, and authenticity in entertainment. One academic article summarized it neatly. Chantel and Pedro blurred the boundary between narrative and reality. Viewers weren't just watching a marriage. They were negotiating their own beliefs about love and truth. The phrase, "I never loved you," became shorthand in digital culture. Memes used it ironically, while relationship podcasts referenced it as a cautionary example of emotional detachment. The moment's resonance went beyond gossip. It tapped into a universal fear, discovering that the person you trusted most never felt the same depth you did. The clip continued to circulate on social media, often stripped of its context, serving as a reminder that every viral moment once belonged to real people. From a production standpoint, the Chantel Pedro arc changed how reality franchises handled personal conflict. Networks instituted stricter psychological support protocols for cast members. Post-filming counseling became standard. Producers realized that raw emotion might attract viewers, but could also leave long-term damage if unmanaged. Internally, several executives credited the fallout with prompting those reforms. In that sense, the couple's story left a tangible mark on the industry that made them famous. Chantel's relationship with fame now operates on her own terms. She occasionally participates in interviews about the ethics of reality television, emphasizing consent and mental health. She avoids gossip shows, but appears in documentary panels where discussion stays respectful. Her online following remains strong but mature. Fewer comments about Pedro. More engagement around self-development and professional growth. She rarely addresses the past directly, preferring concise acknowledgments. That chapter taught me perspective, before steering the conversation toward present goals. Pedro's trajectory shows quiet acceptance rather than reinvention. Those who meet him describe a man more reflective than before, focused on work and family obligations. In the Dominican Republic, reports indicate he visits home more frequently, helping relatives with small property projects. He has not returned to television and has expressed no interest in doing so. For all the criticism he once faced, his decision to step back may be the healthiest one he could make. Living without public validation has forced him to rely on inner discipline instead of audience approval.